Story 1. The Creeps. With all the patience of a man trying to pass a kidney stone, I rubbed at the red rubber ball attached to my nose, waiting and praying for Jeff to finish reading his story. Assignment to the class. It was Halloween, and all the students were dressed up as their favorite villain, monster, or conservative Tea Party political activist. I had merely wanted to throw a sheet over my head and parade around as a ghost, an easily removable costume that would hide me from the banal torture of teaching another creative writing course to less than zealous students. But my wife insisted I go as a clown. "You have to set an example," she told me as she applied the makeup to my face. I was already wearing floppy shoes with fluffy dingleberries dangling from the toes and a pink and blue ruffled outfit that looked like it had been ordered from Rainbow.com. "Besides, we'll need the sheets for later in case you decide to hang yourself," she concluded, only half-jokingly swallowing my irritation. I pleaded my case. "Damn it, woman, it's Halloween. I should at least look semi-creepy." "But you are creepy, dear," she replied, using her lipstick to paint a smudge smile across my frowning mouth. "You're boo-coo creepy." Inwardly groaning, I laughed at the wife's feeble attempt at humor and complied with her anal decision to transform me into Pennywise's flamboyant stepbrother, if only to avoid another night of burnt pot roast and sleeping on the sofa. As I gazed at myself in the mirror before heading to school, I knew I was smiling on the outside, but I was summoning CTHULHU on the inside. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And then Jeff read, finally coming to the ending of his tedious and grammatical train wreck of a story. A skeleton popped out of the toilet and gobbled him up. There were a few titters from the students, mostly from the tweakers, but no one applauded. After 45 minutes and 20 inane attempts at something that even resembled passable literature, I felt their numbness and boredom, and I secretly prayed for a quick and painless apocalypse to descend upon the earth. "Pretty good, huh?" Jeff asked me, turning his masked visage to my own. "No, Jeff," I responded, the jackhammer in my skull forcing the blunt shards of candor from my tongue. "It was shit. Now take your seat." I could smell Jeff's disappointment from across the room, and it was far less than fresh. "Dude, you can't mean that. I spent all week. I mean, I stayed up all night." "Well, I got up extra early, and my parents helped me write this story. It's the best story ever." "And did you use a dictionary or thesaurus while composing your chef-d'oeuvre?" "What?" Jeff nervously glanced to his classmates for encouragement. "They didn't have those things in the cafeteria." "Ah, truth at last," I reply, while steepling my fingers in front of my chin. "Let me be as equally truthful. If I hadn't taken a 5-hour energy drink with my lunch, then your story would have put me to sleep." "I'll put you to sleep," Jeff grumbled as he stepped back to his desk. I could feel the mischievous grin spreading out from beneath his mask, infecting some of the others, and I thought about chucking an eraser at Jeff's retreating back, but then quickly calmed myself. I could no longer remember why I put up with this nonsense. Was it out of love or lunacy? Probably a little of both. "You are the future of literature, the saviors of the written word," I blared at the class. "But right now I am ashamed for all of you. But I don't want to be a writer." Jane whined, confessing her aversion to the uneasy climate left in the wake of Jeff's outburst. "I want to be the first female president so I can end war and bring peace and charity to the whole world." through emotional angst and feminine hyperbole. I stared at that deranged Black Widow wannabe, watching her drag a nail file across her fingers. What she really wanted was to be a serial killer like her brother, but I knew she lacked the balls. "Oh, shut the hell up," Johnny Rake yelled at her in his urban, northeastern drawl, and then he slithered down to hide behind his desk. As strange as it sounds, I could never keep a clear picture of Rake in my mind. Some of the kids said he looks like a canine Mr. Bigglesworth, and I would have dismissed the notion as teenage taunting, if not for the strong odor of kibbles and bits. I heard a growling sound coming from the far left corner of the classroom where the dog was. Sitting, he just innocently waved at me and smiled. Suddenly, the door opened and a fashionably dressed, anorexic-looking fellow sauntered into my classroom, his pale face hidden in shadow. He stretched out his gangly arms before he plunged his finger down his throat, purging himself of Salisbury steak and 2% milk all over the floor. He then ran from the room, all the while crying about how nobody loved him because of how fat he was. That strange event had an even stranger effect on the students. Like hypnotized mall rats, they all began to fold their stories as if practicing origami, shaping their papers into crude-looking hammers. When the bell rang, they all stood as one, eerily silent, devoid of their normal ruckus, and marched single file out into the hallway. Filled with curiosity and foreboding dread, I followed behind only to witness the ignorant zombies making a beeline for the other kids. They raised their muddled mallets to the sky as if in supplication to some Norse deity, and then brought them down onto the psyche of the unsuspecting student body. Chaos ensued. I heard the screams from the other students as they suffered from the stinging wounds of abysmal writing and paper cuts. Mercifully, the lights went out, casting the hallway into indecipherable blackness, but I could still hear my own students chanting in unison from out of that decaying and illiterate cavity. "We make holes in head, we make holes in head." Story 2. The Blissful. When I was a child, I lived in Radnorshire, one of 7 children and the youngest of 6 girls, as my parents had 6 other girls and an infant to take care of. They left me to myself, and I ran about like a wild thing. Not that they didn't love me, but they had other things to do. I was about 5 when I began to see the Blissful. It roamed about the farm, slipping in the shadows, and the only way to see it was to look for the shapes that were darker than the spaces between stars. Its mad eyes were like coal sparks. It laughed like a goat in pain, and it was always angry. I watched it from a distance. One spring I saw it kill a nest of sparrows, closing its hands about the nest until the little naked bird smothered on its flesh. One summer, it poisoned the sheep, biting the Awa's legs until rot and infection ate into their flesh that no about of doctoring could fix. Later, it skulked into the shed and sliced the handyman's chest open, then danced his blood up the walls and over the rafters. My parents said it was an accident, but knew better. The Blissful did it, I told my father, and he boxed my ears for being a liar. No one believed me at all, except the Blissful itself. It grew angrier. At night, it crept into my room, giggling and ripping the blankets away and pinching me. I shared a bed with 2 of my sisters. We didn't all have separate rooms like you do, and when the Blissful came, we shivered together, too afraid to move until morning. We were very little girls, and nobody trusted us with a candle. so we had no way to drive the thing away. It tormented us in whispers, calling us names and telling us we were bad children, because our prayers that it would leave us weren't answered. My sisters refused to speak a word of it, and they wore the blissful inflicted bruises like jewelry, saying they'd fallen over or been bitten by the cat. I decided I would have to find the blissful myself and scare it away. I took the statuette of Florence Nightingale that my mother gave us to hold when we were sick, and a stone with a hole in it, both for luck. As it turned out, I would need the luck. I walked for ages, got lost, and eventually stumbled into a small wooded copse where I had never been before. Under the trees it was cold air, and pine needles and dried leaves lay thick upon the patchy grass. I clutched Florence, and then I saw the bones, bleached and ancient. They lay scattered in a circle. Small bones, large bones, bones half buried in the loam, bones with scraps of dried flesh still clinging to them. A sheep skeleton hung suspended in the tangle of a blackberry bush, and canes had grown through the eye sockets of birds. I started to cry. I knew I'd found the den of the blissful. The blissful appeared from nowhere, crotch down on the tawny grass like a cat about to bounce. The ivory of the bones jutted up around it like little fingers clawing, trying to drag it down. "You'd better run, small girl," the blissful hissed. "Better run, or your brother boy will break his bones." Snap, snap. It vanished, only to appear again behind me. Terrified, I flung my lucky stone at it. The stone passed right through its head, and the ghoul screamed. I'd seen enough. I bolted, dropping Florence, rushing headlong towards where I thought the nearest road should be. Once there, I kept going, my skirt ripped to ribbons by thorns, and my legs stung with nettles, until, turning a corner, I ran smack into my grandfather. He was a big man, my grandfather, and he swung me off my feet and held me as I sobbed. "What's wrong, darling?" he asked when I calmed some. I told him of the blissful and what it had said, and instead of being angry, as my father had been, he listened, his brow furrowed. "Are you feeling brave, darling? Do you think you could be brave for me?" When I nodded, he had me show him where I'd gone. Then he sat me on a bank and gave me his best silver snuff box to hold. "I'm going after the blissful," he told her. "You stay here in the sunshine, and I'll be back soon. If any bad bookie comes, you hit it with that." So I waited, shaking, afraid for my granddaddy, and afraid of the blissful, and afraid of what Mother would do if I lost Florence. Finally, back Granddad came, flushed and bleeding from 100 cuts on his hands. He looked angry, more angry than I'd ever seen him, for he was the mildest of men. "The blissful beast is dead again," he told me, "and under the soil where it belongs." He spat upon the earth and ground the moisture in with his boot heel. "What do you mean, dead again?" I asked. Granddad was quiet for a time, then he said, "The blissful was a damn one who hurt small things because he loved pain. When I was a boy, old Thomas killed him, but young Thomas found where he lay and let him out. I'll sort him out for good soon, and he won't bother you any more." When he arrived at my father's house, he made excuses for my torn dress and tear-stained face, saying I'd been attacked by a dog, and Florence had been broken as I tried to escape. And then, without another word, he went to the shed and fetched the dead handyman's bottle of whiskey and gunpowder and a box of matches. I never went back but I heard of a fire that burned den trees to the ground. Story 3, Group Mind. My name is not Den, but that is what you can call me. Everything I am about to tell you is completely true. I believe I was born in the early 90s. Believe is the right word in this scenario because my otherwise superb memory, in fact, it was once flawless, only begins in 1997. Judging by the status of my body's growth and the growth of the children around me in those fledgling memories, I am quite confident that we were all between the ages of 5 and 7. How they managed to erase our earlier memories I do not know, although I suspect they used the same method they used to control every other aspect of our lives. Drugs. They gave us pills to put us asleep and gassed us away. Our food was coated with chemicals that would regulate our appetite to keep our weight ideal. None of these treatments had negative side effects. They performed their duty with surgical precision. None of the treatments, that is, with one exception. Most of our medications were geared toward keeping us in perfect physical condition to survive the main treatment we had all been brought there to receive. The other drug was designed to maximize the mind's potential. It achieved that goal, and that we were all geniuses with IQ levels well above any publicly released. Yet, as I mentioned before, there were side effects. During the first 16 years of my conscious life, I was telepathically connected to 23 other children, to 12 females and 11 males. We shared every thought, every impulse. Often I saw through another's eyes, heard through another's ears. Sometimes they through mine. This total lack of privacy would certainly upset any average person. But to us who knew nothing else, the telepathic link was not an issue. It was a side effect of the treatment that made our lives hell. The treatment fused all of our minds into one chaotic super being, but we did not really control it. Instead, the group mind had its own desires, and it used our bodies to manifest those desires in the real world. It would assign us duties, often to be done collectively, that sometimes we worked on them as individuals. Although access to the group mind was always there, the group mind's tasks were typically innocuous in nature, such as using our collective intelligence to calculate algorithms that would predict the economic future of China, or to design a superior jet fighter. Yet, at least once a day, without fail, the group mind would make us do things. I hesitate to describe them to you, but the truth must be known. Before I detail my crimes, let me preface by explaining that the strength of the emotions the group mind felt are unlike those ever felt by solitary human minds. The desire to instantly gratify the group mind is overwhelming, while the qualia is impossible to describe with words. At best, it can be compared to an intense heroin withdrawal. It is not possible to distract oneself with happier thoughts, and one is unable to refrain from pacing or self-harm until one knows they will soon follow the group mind's desires. There are times when what the group mind wanted disgusted and even horrified me. Yet I could not avoid following its will. I have hunted, tortured, killed, and even eaten hundreds of animals in countless manners, according to the group mind's commands. I have defecated and urinated on myself and others. I have mutilated myself and others. In 2000, the group mind presented us each with something we had never seen before: a small child, probably around the age of 4. Our instructions were to rip off the child's extremities, starting with the ears. I hesitated but the rush of queasiness that foretells the group mind's displeasure led me to quickly reach down to grab his left ear. As I did, though, a revolutionary idea struck me. Why did this child not run or fight? Why did he simply cower like a frightened animal? Unless, like an animal, he was not group-minded, he did not have 23 others connected to him, offering him advice from their places of relative safety. Quickly, the group mind told us to murder our child, although many of us were still attacking the children's extremities, as I knew from our telepathic bond. But I could think of nothing except a possibility that humans who were not group-minded existed. The backlash for thinking such a thought was immediate and painful. Yet, even through the full-body spasms that had me twitching on the floor, I could not stop thinking about it. Some people have no group mind. No group mind. I almost shouted it straight into the minds of my connected peers. They understood the implications as quickly as I did. There was a way to end our torture. We could live without the group mind. We decided to escape. We attacked our handlers and quickly left our rooms. As we exited the area, the only place any of us had ever known, we realized that we were being hunted by other groups of children, 23 sets of 24, to be exact. Though we had some distance on them, most of us were not fast enough to avoid them. I felt their pain as all 23 of my peers were caught and summarily executed as I reached the door to the exit of the structure, which I realized was underground. I saw two signs with arrows, one pointing left, the other pointing right. The former read structure 21, and the latter read structure 23. In the shock of being disconnected from the group mind for the first time in my conscious life, and the rush of fleeing for my life, I did not comprehend what those signs meant. I do now. There are 24 structures, each with 24 sets of 24 children, with each group of 24 group-minded. I have no reason to believe that the complex I escaped from is the only such complex of structures. In fact, my analysis of the population trends leads me to the conclusion that the program is expanding to people of all ages. The project cannot be stopped. I did horrible things for the group mind, and so will you. The group mind plans to dominate us all, and in time it will. The group mind always gets what it wants, always. Story 4. Mr. Entropy. Where do I start? Well, I was heading home after looking through some old Nintendo games at a yard sale when, no, don't leave. It's not that kind of pasta, I swear. Anyhow, I was going through downtown to catch the bus I needed when I saw a sign on an abandoned building. Not like a warning sign or anything, like a hobo sign. I thought no one used hobo signs since the Depression, so my interest peaked pretty quick. If some tweaker was gonna harvest my organs, might as well do it when I should have known better than to walk into what is no doubt a den of theirs. So I walked into the building, which no one bothered to lock up, and these signs were leading me down to the basement. If my organs were harvested back then, I would have totally had it coming. The organ harvesting thing is a little phobia of mine, just so you know. Back to the point, I went down to the basement, ready to throw down with a tweaker, and I saw a different sign next to a door. This time it was a warning sign, and it was in Russian. I live in Portland, Oregon, not Russia. If Russian warning signs outside of the country of Russia has ever been a good sign for anything, you are insane. My organ-harvest-o-meat was off the charts at the time. but I opened the door anyway. One half of the room was just fine. The other half ceased to exist. It was replaced with a big-ass crater. The tour guides never talked about the crater in the basement of the abandoned building in downtown. So I guess it wasn't supposed to be here. Thing is, the building I was just in was rubble, the skies were gray, and a whole lot of things were rubble. I looked back to the door, and it had collapsed. I'm sure you would have curled up into a fetal position and died. But not me. I should have put back to that. In a minute, I climbed out of the crater, and saw that the whole rest of the city was beat up and all Baghdad-like. Right as I stumbled out, I bumped into a tank, and right at face level was a Chinese flag. The tank was wrecked, but still, I guess years of gaming managed to jade me when it comes to running into post-apocalyptic wastelands and places. There should never be those things, so at least there was that. A resource war. That wasn't me talking. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard that. It was an educated, yet dark voice. I looked around, frantically trying to find the source of the voice, but to no avail. On top of the tank, I looked up to see a man in a gas mask looking down at me. He was wearing a fancy black suit with a blood-red tie, a fedora, and surgical gloves. The lenses of his mask were reflective, so I couldn't see any glowing eyes or maddening abyss or any of those cliches. Now turn around. I'm not going to kill you. I can tell you now that I have zero survival instinct outside of Fallout New Vegas. I turned around, and there he fucking was. If I learned anything from reading creepypastas, it is that anything that can do that should not be trusted. I had failed to apply that logic at the time. You now see how your world is shaped from individual perspective. I believe a slight reality check is in order. The world you know, and everything within it, is in fact not real. I didn't move. I didn't question whether he had seen the Matrix. I just stood with my back against the tank, listening to his every word. You, with your memories and your ambitions, are simply a few billion lines of code. The universe itself, a few Google of lines. You were the creation of a race that had ascended to godlike capabilities. They saw the creation of your universe to be the logical progression. For all they knew, they themselves were created by a higher race, and they were created as well, with no beginning in sight. I am here to break the cycle. My name is Mr. Entropy. I shouldn't have been put at ease a little from his speech, but his voice was a little soothing. My goal is to prevent a technological singularity from occurring for long enough that the stars fall apart and life is impossible. You see before you the fruits of my labor, but this future is not certain. You will help me make it certain. I'm giving you two options, a blue pill and a red pill, if you will. I knew he must have seen the Matrix. 1. You work with me to bring forth World War III, and you will merely die. Or 2. You decline or betray me at any time, and you will see death in a much more favorable way. The choice is yours. You can see why I would have rather just die. It was practically no choice. Before I could speak, I blacked out and woke up some time later on the floor of the basement. Pre-apocalypse. A man was leaning over me. About time you woke up. Do your stuff right, and we won't cut your thumbs off before we ship you off to Mr. Entropy. Got it? I can't believe I lasted this long. By every account, I should be thumbless and going through God knows what. It's been a year, and I managed to sabotage everything. The gang is no doubt on to me. chances are that my time is numbered. If you see this, you know now what is out there, bringing forth our doom. Believe me when I say he must be stopped. I have the gun in my mouth. All I need to do is pull the trig. Story 5, Core. This message is my map, and this map is my message. The earth here is thin. I move about it so freely, and the ease of it is a delicious thing, but it is also frightful. I take my inscriptions by feel and touch, and because I know the earth, I know that this will be massive for your senses. Here in this layer of the planet, I am in between my people and your people. I float about in this soft soul like a drifting bubble, weightless and yet handled so delicately within my surroundings that my fragile dome will never burst. I am fit to drift along in euphoria. I would do this forever, if granted the chance. But I have responsibilities to my people and to our mother. If I were to glide about dreamlessly in this infinite expanse of soft rock, a few fathoms beneath your man-made pay veins, I would lose myself in the arms of Mother, and she would love to have me lost. That exquisite moment will not arrive until your end time comes. For now, I must finish the task I have been chosen for by our matron. She was born from the hard rock and the fire at the very core of Mother, and so I cherish and love her for choosing me to finish this map for our people. If I were to abandon my quest and return home now, I could be in the heart fire of earth within 2 of Mother's circles. Perhaps that holds no meaning for you, but because I have lurked just beneath the pay vein in your greatest den and homestead of New York City, I know that the word I must use is yours. You measure your core by a finite passage of time in units. We measure ours by Mother Earth herself, as you once did, before in history, before you created the deathly grid and thought yourselves too intelligent to honor Mother. This is what saddens her, and this is the cause of the war between my people and your people. It has taken me over 1,000 of your years to reach the earth just below your pay veins and grids of soft rock. At first, I did not understand, and I would glide along through the thin places as your slow-moving metal boxes with the rubber feet would adhere to the limited paths that you have provided for them. They are lumbering beasts, unable to dig, deaf and dumb constructs that are reflective of their creators. I do not pity you, because if you had used her gifts the way they were meant to be used, you would be as my people are now. I traveled up from the heart fire at the core, and I learned your grid. I have traveled it, mapped it, and meticulously crafted the croaked places above the soul. They are illogical. Why you take the soft rock from Mother's ample womb and move it to create your own veins is beyond me. It is disgusting, and it gives me more purpose to fulfill what the matron has set me to your thin place for. Mother's veins are designed to be flowed through, to be embraced and traveled as they were created. What you do to her is an abomination. We hear her soft whimpers at night when we try to sleep, and it pains us the core of fire at her heart is our resting place, and now it is plagued by the agonized wails of the planet. She hid her grief and pain from us, but the nose was too great for us to sleep. You have made us restless. It took time for us to coax her into revealing the source of her sorrow and anguish. That source is you and your people. You have assaulted the most beautiful of beautiful things, and for this we hate you. You have brought this on yourself. By the time one of your geologists finds this long message, riddled throughout the endless tunnels and archways within Mother that I have dug, it will be too late. The map is already almost finished. What I dig now is only superfluous to our real motivations. I dig this message now to provide an explanation, a reason for what we are about to do. We feel that we do not owe you this. Mother feels differently, despite her scars, and so we honor her wishes. The dig from the core has been long. When I first began in the expanses of hardened Malta, I moved slowly. Her screams chased me through the trenches of stone and furious flame as your years passed, and you continue to wound her further. Her pain was my pain, and so my progress quickened. Feeling the shudders of mother, she caused me to burn bright, to blast through the hard rock and reach the thin places where I can move like one of your bullets. The number of trenches and veins that I have burned through her is incomprehensible to your kind. They are all pathways for my people to travel from the core of fire to your thin place. I have mapped her for them, and so they need only unleash our message to you in the boughs of the clouds. You will see the sky burn as bright as our home at her center, and all of you will perish. It will take us some time to overgrow your atrocious paved veins with our earth, but we will help her. We will blast them into oblivion as easily as we will blast from the map beneath your beasts. On rubber, we will reap the cause of her pain away in one ascending windfall, and then her wails may soften. Eventually, she will be gleeful and throbbing with life once more, and we will fall fitfully asleep as we should be now, if it were not for your people. This map is my message, and I am growing tired of your thin place in the crust beneath your metropolis dens. They are an affliction on mother's perfect face, and because you have marred her beautiful cheeks with her own tears, we will rend you with the very fire that we were born from. Story 6. Some rubies could use dental work. They were on their hands and knees, staring into the large gash in the ground. Mallory gripped the loose gravel at the lip of the hole under his calloused fingers, and his nose flared up from the rolls of dust cascading up his snot-sloshing nostrils. Charcoal caked their faces. Benjamin's was blacker than the canopy of darkness over the splintered-out barn roof. The sky's hue shifted like a panther's for rolling in the shadows of fanning jungle leaves, and Mallory nudged Benjamin with his dirt-matted shoulder again, which Benjamin ignored again, and a loose board fell from the buckled open barn ceiling again. Water had collected over its white-painted roof and soaked into its boards, eventually causing its ceiling to cave, smashing to cows dead, and one pig unconscious. The floor was wet. The barn animals ignored the two men. Benjamin said to Mallory, "Your arms are larger." Mallory said, "What has that got to do with anything?" "Means you've got more of a hulk of muscle," Benjamin replied. "Logic, logic. So you creep down there." Mallory shook his head. They were staring at a pair of glowing maroon orbs moving around deep in the belly of the hole. The orbs vanished in a blink, and would reappear in another. Mallory shifted his soggy knees in the mud. "What are they?" Benjamin asked. "I told you when you asked last," Mallory said. "I haven't the foggiest clue. What do you suppose?" "I don't suppose anything." Mallory's feathered eyebrows scrunched down, and the creases at the edges of his mouth fell into a bulldog's frown. Supposing never got any guy anywhere. He supposed that was true. Benjamin scratched at a flaky scat stinging behind his ear. The two continued to sit there like tables, their palms in the dirt, knees in the mud, and rears asking for a kick into the maw of the hole. Benjamin scratched behind his ear again. His muddy fingers were stained mahogany, and he supposed the back of his ear probably looked something like a seeping volcano. At this moment the scab was infected. "How big do you suppose it is, Mal?" Benjamin asked. "I told you I don't suppose anything," Mallory snapped. "Haven't you got a revolver in your truck, boy?" Benjamin shook his head and said, "Just the roofing materials." Benjamin placed the base of his palm against the oozing scab behind his ear and squinted from its sting. He held it there for a while. "Why are you so scared, Mal?" he asked, and glared at the dripping plastic brim of Mallory's hat. "It's dark down there. I'm not risking my hide. If those globes turn out to be a pair of cuddling fireflies," Mallory said, "I guess you shouldn't either, in that respect." Mallory lifted his hat for a moment and pushed his water-wrinkled fingers through his thinning hair, which was sopping with a mixture of sweat and rainwater. "But what if they're valuable, like gems or whatever?" Benjamin asked. "Luxuries?" Mallory smiled for a moment, showing a silver tooth at the corner of his mouth. "And what if we let them slip when they were right at our fingertips?" He shoved a hand down the front of his pants to fix the way his clothing clung to his legs. "The only thing worse than death is letting good things fall into less deserving hands than your own," Mallory said. "Then you're going down?" Benjamin asked. "In what sense?" Mallory replied. He burped. "Never mind," he quickly added, then continued with, "Kid, you ask a lot of questions. That's the best way to learn, isn't it?" Benjamin replied. "From questions? It's the best way to learn how to dig yourself your grave." Mallory showed his teeth in a grand smile and said, "Bring me that nail gun in the back of the truck. You remembered to bring it, right?" Benjamin did remember, and reluctantly he brought it to Mallory. "You wait at the lip of this hole. You understand?" Mallory said, testing the nail gun on one of the wooden wall panels of the barn. The animals glanced over at Mallory and sighed. Mallory slipped down into the hole, and some pebbles followed him down for the first few steps of his descent. "What happened to this one?" the doctor asked one of the nurses. She explained. "He was found on the side of the road with his head buried in his steering wheel and the horn blaring." She knew he was staring at her tightly covered breasts. They were frequent clients to each other's novelties, and he was unconscious. She added, "Well, of course he was unconscious." The doctor laughed and smiled a bit. "So what specifically killed him? Trauma from the accident or what?" "Look here," the nurse said, and turned the corpse on its side. There was a large pulsing crater on the back of his head. "Sepsis." The doctor said, and his eyebrows rose. "Interesting." "Yes," the nurse replied and nodded after a short, awkward moment of silence. "Well, I want to take a closer look at this one," the doctor said, and gripped the side of the metal gurney. "Oh, and bring me any identification or belongings that this man may have had with him." And he began rolling the corpse on an almost expense-free ride down the white blanketed halls of the hospital. "Doctor," the nurse said. She was still following him. "Aren't you interested in the other one?" The doctor said. "Well, wheel him in," he said. He rotated his wrist around in an almost mocking way, signaling to the nurse to hurry up. "Time isn't at our disposal to waste, dear." The doctor winked. "You'll have to come down and see him where he is," she replied. She stuffed her hands in either of her coat pockets. The intercom blared. What the doctor released the gurney from his grip and frowned at her. "Why? Well," she said, "he's sort of been divided into many pieces. Story 7, Nightmare After staring at a laminate television in the dark, I start to get sleepy. My eyes droop, and the feeling of my body in unconsciousness starts to take its toll. Like a trance, with my brain buzzing and my mouth hanging slightly open, I remember that my brother, Claudio, lies on his side diagonally from the television. A marathon of True Blood is on, and I had sworn to catch up on the story. Being that the clock strikes 2 in the morning, my body caves in, my eyes flutter close. Calmly my head lies against the couch. Soundly my heart beats to the pendulum inside the father clock. Breathing, so steady it just brings me deeper under. Something keeps me from falling asleep. Unsettling paranoia creeps on me and trickles down my spine. I shudder to wake, and the clock reads that it's only been 1 hour since I dozed off. Time slips when you are unaware, reminiscing in the cozy rest. Something grips my attention, holding it firmly in its unknown grasp. Unsettling paranoia, it starts to fiercely shake me, and now my eyes rise wide. My skin starts to feel like it's rising off of my bones. I scan the room, very aware now. I rest my eyes on the sliding glass door in the corner of the living room. Outside it seems so normal, the darkness, so absent of light, gropes against the trees so the color goes away. Everything is so black. Curiosity gets the best of me and carries my exhausted body to the clear surface of the cold glass. There is no moon in the November night sky. It's covered by clouds, giving the night no chance of life. My eyes squint with no helpful use to see out into the night. It pulls me with a rope wrapped around my waist. But I hesitate because I fear the unknown. Background noises like the television and my brother sleeping without a care without this disturbance. Knowing the corners of his simple mind start to fade away. The leaves move and the blackness stirs. Yellow eyes flash at me, staring at me with nothing but fierceness of the being. I want to go out and talk to this irritating fear. Usually one would want to run away from something that glares deep into your soul with insanity. But I must know what lies on the other side. My brother awakens and asks what I'm doing. I slide open the door without acknowledging him, and a cool breeze whispers in my ear and against my skin. There is a long dirt path that leads into the woods. Taking baby steps, my curiosity leads me on. More yellow eyes sprinkle the dark trees and the bundles of bushes. They started rising out of nowhere. I'm not sure what's causing me to keep walking forward, but with every step I take, my heart grows in cowardice. My palms get sticky with sweat along with an unwelcome wave of warmth flowing through me. It is the dread that makes my stomach turn, that makes my knees wobble, that races my mind and turns my sanity upside down. The yellow eyes seem to burn their way into me. My breathing speeds and I walk faster. The darkness reaches out to me and touches me, trying to get its hold in me. More yellow eyes come together, and I see a sickly shape form around the small yellow orbs, large and deformed. The air is thick with the odor of iron, almost like blood. The shapes all take place with the yellow eyes, growing all around me at intense speeds. My legs get the signal to run, so they obey. My long brown hair falls behind me, and so does all the hope I had for turning back. They chase me now, and I can't stop. But I do stop because there is a cliff ahead after escaping all these looming trees. From the air, 3 of the beings land in a hunch in front of me. growling fills the air, and I freeze in a moment of panic. Whatever they were, they had long appendages coming from their back and ribs. There is a cloud break in the sky, and the moonlight gracefully pours over the land, and everything that inhabits it. I saw it. They have decomposed skin, and those strikingly terrifying yellow eyes, with blood staining their macabre flesh, ripped apart and allowing the disconfigured bones so show, the organs flowing naturally out of them, but without them acknowledging it. Their faces are the worst part of this horror. Large teeth with a Glasgow grin following all the way up the cheeks to their tiny ears, their tongues hanging down and slobbering all over themselves, blood and saliva. I clench my heart. It feels like it stopped. This is like the worst beings to come out of my insane nightmares, things that only come out of the dark, and living proof that true terror does exist. Hissing and moaning and groaning, they all surround me. Their stench is too horrid to bear. The earth spins around me, and I just accept my fate. Taking in the last feelings of living, I look around me and see a break. Everything closes in on me, and I spot a large stick on the ground. I pick it up and charge for the trees, whacking a being in the head, sending it backwards. With a small sigh of relief, I know that it still isn't over. The things were running after me, emerging from the abundance of trees, beings with boiled skin and glowy. Even though they have dead skin, I am only going as fast as my weak legs will let me. Seeing the light from my home ignites a warm reassurance in me, a hope that escaped from me. I stumble and slow tripping at the steps of the sliding glass door. I fumble to open the door and fall into the warm building, letting the light embellish around me. I turn with my palms and face pressed against the glass. There was nothing but the haunting black left behind. Bonus stories, Story 1. Gateway of the Mind. In 1983, a team of deeply biased scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human, without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli, would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the five senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer to purge him of all his senses. The scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After, for days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and, even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information to the scientist that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming, and every waking moment his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientists for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his known functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point he yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness" for 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite off chunks of flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had to be manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with a scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us," and his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. Story 2. The Witch's Tunnel. Close to where I live there is a forest which holds a dark secret. The Witch's Tunnel, a cluster of trees that have intertwined, clasping hands with each other to form a dark passage. It is said deep within the forest lives an old witch with eternal knowledge. Walking through during the day is unsettling. A walk through this tunnel at midnight in the dead of winter, when the moon is full, is a different experience entirely. The branches will twist and sway as if trying to grab you, and you'd swear they were alive. There will be no sound except the wind whispering in your ear, telling you to turn back. What looks like a distance of a few feet will take you nearly an hour to travel. If you turn round, the entrance will be barely visible, a mere speck. Turning back now, however, would be a very bad idea. You must keep walking. Eventually you will come out the other end, only this won't be the same forest as it is in the day. The moon will be so big you could almost touch it, and where its light manages to pierce through the dense foliage, you'll see the ground is alive with insects, one big crawling mass. Grotesque, mocking shadows will surround you in a thick blanket of fear. As you continue, the path will split in two. Look for a crow in the trees. She will indicate which path to take and serve as your guide. If you ignore her and take the other path, you will be doomed to walk it for eternity as punishment for your insolence. The correct path leads to a break in the trees overlooking a small lake, thick with fog. Remain here until the fog clears, then walk to the shore. Glancing at the deep black water, you will see yourself reflected, only many years older. If you see nothing, you have already failed. You may ask your future self one question, and it will answer truthfully. Ask wisely, however. Some things you are not supposed to know. When you have your answer, turn round, and you will see the crow has reappeared, only now in her true form, a sunken-faced old hag propped up by a gnarled branch. She will turn and begin walking, and you must follow her a few yards behind. Be careful not to lose sight of her, as you will become lost in these forbidden woods forever. She will stop beneath the tallest tree in the forest, and her bony finger will beckon you over. Approach her, but do not look her in the face, lest what you see behind those ageless eyes drive you insane. In return for letting you into her wise woods, she will ask a favor of you. This could be anything, from reading a certain book to committing a murder. Promise her this favor, and she will lead you out of the forest. Upon leaving the forest, return home immediately and go straight to bed. The next day, rise at dawn and return the witch's favor. If you do not do so within 24 hours, she will return to you that night. She won't kill you herself. That would be too easy. No, she will whisper in your ear whilst you sleep, invading your dreams and filling your subconscious with dark suggestions. You will create your own death, tearing yourself apart both mentally and literally. The witch does not forgive. Story 3. The Thing in the Window Illustrated Creepypasta. I'm pretty freaked out. That thing has been there for almost a week. The figure in the window, it looks featureless, only skin on a human frame, and it's pressing itself against the glass somehow. I don't know how it got there, and I don't know how to get rid of it. At first I thought it was a prank, a doll or mannequin that some jerks put there to scare me. But I realized as I walked out of my house to pull it away, it wasn't there. I shrugged it off, thinking that someone had hidden it while I was walking through my door. But I went back in and looked out that same window, and it was looking in, staring at me. I walked around my house, yelling for whoever it was to come out, that no one was there. The thing is hairless and naked, and it didn't look like it actually had eyes or even a face at all. But its head is turned towards me when I enter the room. When I sit on my computer, I can feel its faceless hatred boring into my neck. But when I turn around, it's innocently turned in a different direction. Finally, on Thursday, I tried to open the window, but it's stuck. I think the thing's hands are keeping it down, but I got a good look at its face. Its eyes and mouth are behind the skin, pushing outward. It stared at me, smiling. I pulled back a fist and smashed it onto the glass, determined once and for all to get rid of the glaring monster. I know I'm strong enough. That glass should have cracked, but it didn't. It shuddered under my hand, but it didn't break, and that smile just got wider and wider and wider, until I thought its head would break in half. It raised its own hand and bashed the window with its palm. It was mocking me, but I saw the faintest crack begin to appear where it had hit, and I backed away. No way did I want that smile in the same room as me. So I got a roll of duct tape, and I started covering the window. I couldn't look directly at it. I nearly shit my pants just knowing it was watching me. But I couldn't help it. I took a quick glance at that skin-covered face, a small peek. It was angry. That menacing grin was now a gaping frown full of teeth. The skin had ripped away from its mouth, and I could see down its cavernous throat. A menacing rumble started to fill the house, and that hairline crack began to spread like splintering ice. I pulled down the duct tape. The rumble stopped. The split skin healed over, and it began to smile again. Now it's night, and the noise hasn't started again. There are no sounds, no rumble, no crackling glass. Everything's quiet now. But I can feel its claws gripping the back of my chair. I can hear its skin stretching as it smiles. It's watching me type. Story 4. The reCAPTCHA was wrong. Have you ever seen a photo reCAPTCHA? Instead of a checkbox, It's a low-quality photo split into 16 square sections. It'll say something like, select all squares with street signs, and you have to click every square that contains a street sign. At 11 p.m. on Sunday night, I got one. Downloading free stock images. It was a photo of a path through the forest. Select all squares with people. Okay, that was easy enough. In the center, there was a jogging woman in pink shorts. She took up a few of the middle squares, and I clicked them all. I pressed verify. It didn't work. Select all squares with people. The message said again. I took off my glasses, placed them on the table, and squinted at the image. No, she wasn't the only person several feet off the trail. At the very edge of the image, I could see it, the edge of an arm clad in a black sweatshirt, with a pink thumb poking out. I triumphantly clicked the 2 squares containing it. Verify. The image blinked as it refreshed. Then the same text popped up, as if to taunt me. Select all squares with people. I rubbed my eyes and stared at the image. The trees cast low-resolution, blocky shadows across the path. The woman's ponytail swung to the left, mid-motion. Patches of yellow sunlight dappled the surrounding forest. I studied some of the darker shadows far from the path, but none of them matched the silhouette of a person. I glanced to the edge of the image. No, the image had changed. The arm at the edge of the photo was now further in the frame, taking up 3 squares instead of 2. Bulky shoulders and arc jeans followed it, and the jogger was just slightly further down the path, as if she'd just taken a step. The touchpad was slick under my fingers. My heart pounded in my chest. Slowly, I dragged the cursor over the 3 squares and clicked them all. Verify. The image blinked. Select all squares. With people, I leapt back from the computer. The image was different again. The man was further in the frame, taking up 5 squares. His hand was stretched out towards the jogger, just inches from her shoulder and the jogger. She was turned towards him, eyes wide, mouth open, and a silent scream. Click, click, click. I furiously clicked all the squares. Verify. Loading. Select all squares with people. The man's face was finally in frame. The hood of his sweatshirt was pulled tightly over his head. A translucent Halloween mask poked out from underneath, pressed against his features. His hand was lashed onto her arm. She was screaming. Click, click, click. Verify. The image disappeared. I'd passed the reCAPTCHA. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I reported what I'd seen to the police. At first they thought I was crazy, but as I gave a detailed description of the images, they frantically took notes and asked me questions. The woman matched the description of a local woman, Kaylee Johnson. She went missing a week ago during an afternoon jog on the wooded Lakewood Trail. She was never found. Story 5. Early from work, Margaret had, as usual, been left to the confines of her bedroom, with her father working the night shift and her mother ill with pneumonia. She didn't have anyone to talk to. The only noise was the ticking of the clock, the slight humming of the radiator in the corner, and her own thoughts. She did not sleep well for a 9-year-old. School was not hard. Life at home was fairly quiet, no reason to be stressed, but something inexplicable always seemed to occupy her mind, as if it would never seem to cease generating irrelevant questions and thoughts. I wonder how black bears always manage to. A small bump in the kitchen downstairs, clearly audible from her bedroom, interrupted her mental tangent. It was most likely her cat, said, harassing a mouse. Her door was cracked a bit after all. He was a noisy pet. She began to drift off to sleep. The time on the analog clock read the 27, dimly lit by a street lamp through the semi-closed blinds of her window. The smell of the old house relaxing her, she awoke again, unsure of the time, due to the fact that the street lamp must have gone out. The city's power grid was very inconsistent. The usual rhythm of the small two-story home was interrupted once again by the nosy cat downstairs. "Oh, Sid," she grumbled. Margaret sat up and turned on the lamp on next to her bed to read the time. As soon as the switch on the light clicked, the thumping in the kitchen ceased. The clock read 3:48. That's interesting, she thought. The cat must have heard the light turn on and refrained from bumping around. Then the realization struck her. The cat was not downstairs. He had been curled up against the radiator this entire time. Maggie was about to call for her mother to complain about the obnoxious random bumping in the kitchen, but before she said anything, she stopped herself. It would be terribly inconsiderate to wake her sick mother before the break of dawn to complain about an old house making noise. She turned the light out and curled up in her blankets. Some time had passed. The bumping did not reoccur. However, she did hear the side door opening downstairs and the footsteps of an average weight man. Her father must be home early. He wasn't due back home for another hour and a half. It was about 4 a.m. in midwinter, so the sun was nowhere near the horizon. There was a long pause in his movement until his light footsteps moving up the creaky old staircase broke the silence and grew closer to her room. It was unusual that he came to visit Maggie when he arrived from work. As the sound of the grown men treading down the hall towards her room, she sat up in the pitch darkness. The doorknob turned and the door opened. "Hey, Dad," she said. There was no reply. She couldn't even see his silhouette. Just then the street lamp flickered back on again, lighting the room enough through the blinds to see his shape. But to her horror, what stood in the doorway before her did not even resemble her dad, or a human. She was in shock. She couldn't move. A squeaky-sounding wah came from her. She was paralyzed. And by the time Margaret had found the voice to scream, it was too late. Story 6, Moonlight. Finally, after a day of boring canoeing and fishing, I get to go to sleep. I can't believe I got dragged along on this camping trip. I take one last look at the sky before I go into the tent. I can see through the trees that there's a full moon, but it looks like the clouds are about to block it. Not like I care, I just want to go to sleep. So I crawl into the tent, get into my sleeping bag, and throw my head onto my pillow. Jake, my so-called friend, who is responsible for bringing me out into the middle of this lame forest, climbs into the tent. After me, we chat for a bit and then say goodnight. But I lay awake. I can't help but notice just how quiet it is. I don't even hear any bugs. I'm still thinking about it as I fall asleep. I wake up, but it's still dark. In fact, it's darker than when I fell asleep. Then I remember that the clouds were going to block the moon. I can't figure out why I woke up, but then I hear it, a rustling. I look over towards Jake. He's still sleeping soundly, not moving. The nose isn't coming from him, but then I realize it's coming from below the tent. I couldn't feel it because I was on my air mattress, but the entire bottom of the tent was writhing. I wonder if an animal had pushed itself down there. I reach out to touch it, and when I do I feel something thin, long and moving, and there are a lot of them. I yell and yank my hand back. Had we set up our tent on a snake's nest or something? My yell wakes up Jake. He begins to ask what's wrong. Then he sees the issue. He lets out a yelp as well. He then calls out for his parents, who were in a separate tent a short distance away, but no response. We're both staring at the tent floor when we hear it, the sound of tree branches moving, but the tent isn't being flapped around. There's no wind. So what is it that's moving the trees? Suddenly the bottom of the tent stops moving. So do the tree branches. We both sit in complete silence, too scared to say anything. Then, right by me, directly outside of the tent, I hear a giggle. It shatters the silence. So do our screams. Once we calm down, we hear more giggling. Lots of it. More than one person could ever do on their own. At that moment the clouds clear, allowing the moon's light to shine again. What it showed is the silhouette of a short, to foot at most, figure hunched over by the tent. We can see more of them dropping from the trees, all of them giggling manically. Then, all at once, the giggling stops. The one closest to the tent holds something up. It's about the size of a soccer ball. Then, with a horrible sinking feeling, I know what it is, the head of one of Jake's parents. I try to stifle a sob of pure terror as the hunched figure, in complete silence, slowly walks around the tent, reaches the door flap, and begins to open the zipper. Story 7. Deepest fear. It took me a month to figure out the pattern it was using to kill us off. At first it was Jack, who was found dead, lying face down and submerged in his own bathtub. His mother had been the one that found him. The poor woman, her lifeless body was discovered a week later, after countless complaints from her apartment neighbors about a pungent odor from her apartment. After breaking into the home, the police found her hanging from a rope from the rafters of her bedroom. It went after Diane next. Diane, who had been a victim of dog mauling when she was just 5 years old, was discovered just a week after Jack's mother was found, her body, lying by the side of the forest surrounding the town, was practically ripped to shreds. There were countless bite and claw marks, courtesy of a pack of stray dogs that had been roaming the neighborhood for weeks. It went after Kyle a week back. I could tell that Kyle had suspected that something was wrong. His text messages to me grew increasingly frantic as he began telling me about a strange figure, a clown, he said, climbing out of his closet night after night and standing at the foot of his bed. At first I had thought nothing of it. Kyle had always been a pretty high-strung kid since young and was prone to panic attacks, so this was probably just one of his outbreaks. Calm down, I recalled telling him. It's probably a serial killer. Just keep your doors and windows shut and locked. Just calm down, and your hallucinations would go away. Boy, was I wrong. Kyle's body was found just 2 days ago, after he failed to show up to breakfast on time that morning. His mother had gone up to his bedroom to wake him up when she found him, cold and rigid, his eyes glassy and opened wide, staring straight ahead at the foot of the bed. There were no wounds or bruises of any sort. The coroner later on declared Kyle's cause of death to be a heart attack. That's when I realized that something was really wrong. It couldn't have been the work of a serial killer. It just doesn't add up. It had to be something supernatural, something that could target and attack our deepest, darkest fears, something that could pit our fears against us. You see, Jack, who had drowned, was always terrified of water. Jack's mother who doted dearly on her son, had always been overly protective over Jack. His death would have been the ultimate blow to her. Next was Diane, who had always been extremely fearful of dogs ever since her childhood incident, and Kyle, who always had an irrational fear of clowns. Well, you get the idea. And as for me, I have always been afraid of the dark. I can tell it's coming for me. I've recently begun seeing crazy hallucinations, shadows morphing into indistinguishable shapes of monsters and demons, things that no normal human being should be seeing. I'm no fool. I know my time is coming. Even as I am writing this, I can hear it moaning my name over and over again from the darkest corner of my room. I've given up keeping the lights on. I've given up fighting. It's no use anymore. I'm just so exhausted. Goodbye.